You're in the land of visible pain, my home.
You are disgusting, you filthy maggot. I hate you.
We've developed an existence where no one relies on anyone. Of course, that's not what we had in mind.
One Sunday evening when I was 12, I was about to walk out of the first of two front doors of my grandmother's house. As I passed by the open archway on my left to the living room where she sat, always on the furthest side of a cracked leather couch in that room with faded and stained blue and green carpeting, I simply said, "See you later," pressing open the first door and going straight out of the second onto the porch, down the few stairs and into my dad's car to be dropped off home for the coming week. It was a moment like so many more. The second it passed almost faded into obscurity from its seeming unimportance. The idea that there could be something meaningful in just a couple seconds wasn't even the spark of a thought in my childhood mind. But that would be the last sentence I ever spoke to my grandmother before she passed, and her response was lost to me in how quickly I moved. Me and her were never close. As a child, I had none of the wherewithal I do now to find importance in so many things, and so my time with any of the grandparents I did meet was simply my getting to the PlayStation 2 as quickly as possible. Despite this, or maybe exactly because of it, I've always regretted those being my final words to her. I regret how much wasn't said, how little I asked of her surviving the patriarch that tormented a family for years, how little I asked of recipes lost to being held only in one mind, how little I said any words expressing how much a person can truly mean. I regret how little I understood and can never regain as a consequence of that. And even knowing this, I still struggle with leaving things unsaid to this day. It's a process which is now repeating within the family again as age ticks on, and the man who in some way provided me with the thirst for knowledge I have could worsen at any moment. As the lives of me and my brother go further and further apart to likely one day separate entirely, and as I feel the friendships which once defined my life drift into the obscurity of children and discovered identity. I know how easy it is, how often someone else is thinking exactly what you are, and yet fear holds it back. How much a simple thing like, "You really are my friend," could mean, and I still fail. I wonder with past relationships how often those thank yous one found implied may have counted. How much more could have been considered had I ever taken these lessons to heart, and how much my future will suffer from the same fact. I make all of this in part because of my past mistakes. Every lesson I learn must now be burned more deeply into my brain from a 2-week cycle of obsession so that this time it might finally mean something. With all of this considered, to those who are concerned with the abstract, it becomes almost natural to wonder, how can we solve this issue? How can we break down the barriers of expression between all people and create a world without this kind of pain? At least this is the thinking presented in one case of Kino's journey, where a traveler comes across many countries with many ways of life. In this one, they seem to be alone while exploring the city center, greeted and served only by robots and never other humans. However, with a better vantage point, they observe that everyone is here. They're simply sitting alone in their homes. Every house is full of someone tackling their tasks entirely alone. Venturing out into the countryside, Kino manages to find a few citizens outside, but each one desperately rushes back inside with an intense fear the moment they come near, leaving our traveler isolated still. It isn't until they close in on a distracted man that they begin to get an explanation as he asks from around the corner,
Can it be? Can you hear what I'm thinking right now? Are you reading my mind?
Ensuring him that they can't, and finding that he can't for them either, the man is comfortable enough to invite Kino in and explain. To begin, the man speaks about communication, saying how this was a place where people sought to truly and fully understand each other in an effort at an eternal peace, quite the contrast to their current state. They believed that with full, fluent understanding, humans would cease to feud and form a utopia. However, this is quite the task because the means we currently know to connect with one another aren't sufficient for this end. As he says,
Words have their problems. Often misinterpretation and inadequacy are the largest.
We'll start with the latter, which is inadequacy. What this means is that we can't communicate what's in our mind. I can speak these words to you and you can hear them and attempt to understand their meaning, but it is only an attempt, because what's truly inside my mind to be communicated is not words, even if that is how we interpret and express thoughts. It's some mixture of impulses and neural pathways and all these biological functions which create what we view as thoughts. It's not language itself. We simply created language to label and express things in an easy and efficient manner, since we have no capability to take those impulses and directly implant them in another. This means that what we share with others is not the idea itself, but an idea of the idea. It is incomplete, missing the sensations which prove it within our minds, and relying on language which merely simulates the sensations. This then leads into the other issue of interpretation. Because just as we express it to someone and lose a layer in that process, another is lost as they hear the words and calculate what they meant. They could mishear them or not be listening or outright refuse communication. Someone else has to have the will to interpret your words before they can be. Even if they are perfectly attentive in the conversation, there is still the issue of their own internal framework. This could be expressed in the old example of color. I look at this pencil and, well, call it pink. You do as well, and we walk away believing we saw the same color. But how do you know? We only know what a color is because someone told us that this was so when we were young. This could be to you what blue is to me, but we've both been told to call it pink and as such know it that way. We can't actually crawl into each other's heads and see that it is truly the same sensation. And so each child grows up being told that this is that, and even if they're seeing something entirely different, they will communicate it as if it's the same and never know. And this was just a brief overview. There's also the issues of lying, of different languages and dialects and accents, which feed into other issues, of time and place altering our mental state, and you could go on for days listing the issues that arise from taking a thought, translating it into a communicable method, and then reinterpreting it back into a thought in someone else's mind. This is why the people of this country made an insane invention, a serum which allows for the instant communication of all thoughts. Anyone who drinks it can read the mind of anyone else who drank it within a certain distance. And not wanting to be the only one left out of a social utopia, every single citizen joins in and drinks. As the man explains, this had some great benefits to everyone's lives, and he uses his own as the example. Decently shy and reserved, he was in love with a girl he knew and seemed to be friends with, but was unable to truly express his feelings for. If you so much as went to a high school, you likely know this feeling already, that mental ping pong of form a relationship and lose the friendship, battling back and forth in a game of risk and reward. The disconnect between the thought and the expression creates this situation because it allows us time to play this game, weighing the odds over and over and over, and then seeing that there is always a logical reason to let fear win and say nothing. Since saying something is an action, and saying nothing is only a thought, the latter is always easiest, and inaction defeats action. However, once they all drink the serum, this barrier is removed. Now both are the same. And this brings him and the woman, eventually his wife, together. The first time they see each other after drinking it, their minds immediately rush together as he finds she was thinking the same thoughts as him, and a river of once dammed love can finally rush forward. Across what might have been years, this was held back. Either could have confessed at any time and yet always found reason not to, leaving so much positive action in the realm of thought alone. But now their nights are no longer alone, their meals are made with more care and purpose, their bodies free to feel passion. If it can do this for these two people, imagine how it impacts the others' lives as well. The scientific discoveries that would be made from lack of confidence overcome, the leaders who could no longer lie to the public, the friendships which would become solidified as if steel. It seems definitive proof that this barrier of communication is something holding us back from much better lives. In a way, it's saying that we should much more often speak, much more often express, that only what is said is what counts. But this isn't how things stay. To some degree, the first issue remains, as communicating a thought, something which has already been processed into a communicable form, isn't the same as communicating a feeling, something which is the truly adequate, unadulterated thing we seek to transfer between people. Because even with this serum, your neurons aren't suddenly theirs. There's only a link between the result of them, which forms in your mind. It is a more efficient means of communication, but it is not an inherent means of it. Such a thing doesn't exist. You could also use the logic of nature and nurture here. Your feelings are your nature, who you inherently are, and your thoughts are nurture, who you were raised to be. As such, there will always be some things which we understand and some which we don't, because we hold within us an inherent character. Now, I'm not really buying into that latter idea as much. I think the former is more likely, and so I'll be working with that in mind moving forward, but the latter is worth mentioning if you find it more satisfying. After all, I'm not saying I have answers, I'm only encouraging thought. Now with this couple, we see it come to a head over their strongest held likes and dislikes. She likes flowers, and he likes music. These are things based on their feelings. That is, he loves music because of what it stirs in him, not what he thinks about what it stirs in him. The second part is merely finding words for the first. And then the same is true of her and flowers. The other person can learn the latter, that is, to appreciate what it stirs in them by conscious effort and thought, but they cannot learn the former, to love it inherently. So there is still a disconnect here which will apply to all things. Those around you won't suddenly understand everything that you do. They'll simply have more access to seeing why you do, and then still failing to do so themselves on the strong issues where the divide is just too great. This means that, yes, a questioned thank you will be communicated, and all those important small details that we often forget become known. I've stated many times how important those can be. But since there isn't true understanding still, it also means that every single minor gripe will be translated and conflict-worthy just the same. Every time someone around you makes that small noise you think is super annoying, but you let go because you understand that 1 second is worth a fight about how someone's body works, that thought is now known to them. Every time your partner's special interest dumps about something you kind of hate but let them do anyway because it's fine to like different things, they now know for a fact that you hate them talking about it. This is the point. We can no longer consciously choose someone else over a minor discomfort. Even if we train ourselves to only think positive thoughts about it, like repeating internally, "At least I love how excited they are," again and again, they'll hear those and know that you're simply enduring discomfort for their sake, and it becomes very undesirable to know someone is doing that. Can you actively say that you would want to keep making someone you love do something they don't want to at all? And that's still the ideal case. That's if everyone learns how to translate their feelings into thoughts perfectly all the time. If you have one bad day at work and simply can't bring yourself to put in the effort, the thought of "this is stupid" is what they'll hear about something they like instead. When they wake you up at 3 a.m. by accident and you're in a terrible mood, they'll hear whatever you first think about that strong, awful feeling. This means that some level of unawareness, while more often than not unhealthy, is actually required for people to properly function together. Without it, a cycle is formed. You can't choose to move past the small things, which are expressed in turn from 1 minute of discomfort into 1 hour of fighting, and then that 1 hour of fighting then becomes a whole day of it, as each negative thought about the fight is the next one to be expressed, causing a conflict of its own between the two people. You get annoyed about being annoyed, and then get annoyed about being annoyed about being annoyed, and it never ends as all emotional maturity is exhausted. A very simple bad thought becomes infinitely more negative than it had any right to be, and everything falls down around it. And this becomes very easy to trigger. Imagine this couple situation where they'd first probably agree to separately enjoy the things they do. He's off listening to music and she's tending to the garden. Naturally, each one of them begins thinking about the thing that they're doing, but then this is communicated to the other who's within range because they live with each other. And so even though they weren't taking part in that activity, now they kind of are because they're in the vicinity. While he's listening to music, he's also hearing about flowers, and she has the opposite. During the time they're supposed to be enjoying something they like is something they don't care about at all, which is annoying. This annoyance is then communicated and the fight ensues, even with distance between them and a conscious effort not to interfere. You can't even think about the things you like because it will end up imposing on someone else who doesn't like it. This is why he explains,
We began to both think of unrelated things, so neither could read the other's thoughts.
First of all, it would be awful to have to try and think of random things all the time instead of enjoying your life. But further, it didn't work because this itself still gives away the issue of annoyance. Remember, everyone is in the same situation here, and so they see that you're thinking about unrelated things, which expresses the social issue everyone understands from living through it. They know what the other is trying to do because they had to do it themselves. And so they end up just sitting in silence with the clatter of dishes, each trying to think of nothing at all, but then still communicating that they hate each other by doing so because they can't even trust a single thought not to form a conflict. And so she gets up and leaves without a word, but saying everything which must still be said. He throws the dishes down in anger, and that's that. It spreads across the entire society since this is inherent between all people. Chaos ensues anytime someone is near anyone else, and so they isolate into their homes forever, as we see in the opening. No one has connections, so no one can have kids, and the country will slowly perish after this generation.
We've developed an existence where no one relies on anyone. Of course, that's not what we had in mind.
Now, you could say that since the serum is magic anyway, it should just communicate feelings instead of thoughts, and well, that would solve the issue. However, if those feelings, the most bare essence of who we are all mixed into one big pile together, then life itself becomes pointless. A degree of separation is required for individualism to exist at all. All feeling the same things, we would just be like ants in a colony perpetuating the hive mind in different bodies. There's nothing to actually distinguish you from me, no goal, no expression, no family or friends, and no reason to exist. Even if you die, some other body of you still exists after all. Now that collective consciousness idea is a whole host of other abstract logic, and so I'll leave that to a card on screen where I have a dedicated video on that topic with Neon Genesis Evangelion. Back on track, what we see is that instant connection is actually detrimental. If we remove our choice to communicate, then communication becomes worthless. It requires our input, our use of time and energy to show the importance of ourselves and others. Because nothing can be perfect. Perfection entails the same issue of all things becoming one and defeating the point of existing. So between all people, there must be things to agree and disagree about, and our game of connection becomes an act of weaving between all the people to find the ones who have the most tolerable disagreements in comparison to the most important agreements, and then making the active choice to push those to the extremes. We let the disagreements go to keep them small, and let the agreements grow so we can become even better for one another. We need to be able to make active choices in what we do and don't say in order to fulfill that contract of sorts. Otherwise, we have nothing more than a Brave New World style everyone belongs to everyone, but somehow worse. The other component that separation of thoughts and chosen expression creates is trust. It may seem that a world full of instantly shared thoughts is the most trustworthy, given no one can lie or deceive. But it's actually a world which has no concept of trust. Trust is knowing that someone could be lying to you, that there are logical reasons and things they could gain from doing so. It's watching them go out the door away from you and holding within yourself that they will keep you in their best interest, even if it makes sense that they could not. Trust is the thing we place within those important to us, to believe solid action over abstract doubt, what separates them from strangers passing by on the street. You could argue that trust then is simply the band-aid on the issue of limited means of communication, and well, I think that is valid. But that's what most things are. Band-aids to solve the wounds which arise due to us being individuals. This is one time where treating the disease and not the symptoms is worse. And so knowing our curse to be apart has to exist, and yet our desire to come together anyway, trust becomes one of the most important things. Do we believe the person who exists before us, their actions and all they've shown us? Or do we believe some imagination subject to fears and desires and all that bias? This is expressed in Kino's journey through the man's favorite song. He admits that it was something he often played for her before they drank the serum, and she would say in a pleasing tone that she enjoyed it. However, knowing her lack of care for music in general, he always held doubts about the truth of her statement. Was she just saying it for his sake? So once they do become connected in thought, he never again plays what was his favorite song because, as he says,
After we drank the thought share serum, my doubts about her sincerity only grew stronger.
It is a fear that we've all held at some point. When you have something that important to you, that kind of thing you've defined your conscious character around, spent so much time with, you actually struggle more to show it to someone you care about than someone you don't. Because if they end up hating it, then it means they hate a part of you. However, what is the result of allowing this fear to win the day? Say she does actually hate the song and was lying to him. If he plays it and this is true, then he would never play it again. But what if he plays it and this is false and she does actually end up enjoying this one song at least? Then he could have gone on listening to this favorite piece and actually finding his time worthwhile. The route he took, the one without trust, guarantees that he never gets to hear it again, even though there was a route which had better potential. Logically then, it makes no sense to assure failure when there is possibility otherwise. Even if it means confirmation that she hates a part of him, by refusing to listen to the song, he's already killed that part of himself, so the decision is still the same. There is no reason to not trust them enough to at least try. And for an extra bit of irony, when Kino leaves the town, they see that he has flowers in front of his house, and they pass by another home playing the same one he showed her, with the silhouette of a woman matching the one he spoke of. He didn't care for flowers, but he kept them because of how she did. And she actually did enjoy that one song so much that she still plays it to this day. These specific cases, a small subsection of the greater whole, could have been the things that they really would share and bond over, the magical overlap of their fundamental characters or whatever it might be. Maybe it was just the one time where it was just good enough that she could always bring herself to consciously think, well, I do love this one song, if nothing else. Maybe those were the kind of flower he thought was truly beautiful and would have thought, well, I love to keep these about. They could have listened to that one song while tending to that one kind of flower, if nothing else. Maybe now each serves as a reminder of the other and their best qualities, their passion and their excitement for something truly and honestly loved. All those things we allow to blossom with what we both do and don't say. Negativity breeds negativity and positivity, positivity. This makes it our duty to, within reason and without accepting undue harm, do our best in fostering the latter and allowing the former to pass beyond us. It is our active decision to say what is good and not say what is bad. And two, as we see fit and as makes healthfully sense, trust rather than acting on doubts. Because trust is more or less a positivity found in what isn't said. And this is all wrapped up in the ending of the episode. The man has been extremely happy to speak with Kino, given that no one in this town has had an honest conversation, or, well, actually any conversation at all, in probably years. But Kino, as the constant traveler, has to stick to the rule of only staying in one place for 3 days at most, despite his asking for a little bit more time to speak. Their rejection is blunt, offering no hint of even considering this worth halting the journey. However, in the silence which follows, Kino lifts their goggles to give an honest look and smile at the man, who sees it, changes his face to a smile as well, and waves them off just the same, holding that expression as they pass over the horizon. What this is trust and communication. They have no confirmation of what the other truly meant from those glances and those upturned corners of the mouths, but they have an idea of what it could mean. They have information about the other to whittle those possibilities down to only the realistic and positive ones. There's no way that that look from that person communicated hate, but it could communicate gentle care because such a thing is within what they've proven capable from their time together. And so, what they settle on independently is something calming, something positive, if nothing else, which is all such a goodbye demanded. A little acknowledgement of one important moment in the long flow of life. Maybe when we seek out such direct and efficient communication, we're overdoing things, even if it is most often positive. Sometimes we just need to sit back, relax, and realize what the moment truly needs. That for all the times a lot of words and expression confirms feelings and makes for great connections, a smile and a wave can do just the same. That what isn't said holds just as much power as what is. As always, this video is in a way targeted at myself. I have an issue with being too logical sometimes, which, in worse but just as true words, means putting my feelings over others. When it comes to relationships specifically, you can find many moments to make your displeasure known so that the other person is aware of your efforts, or in a worse way, train them away from their own desires. That is, like, if they ask you for help and you do so, but only after a huff and a puff, after making it known that, well, I was just doing something really important. With that, they'll stop seeking to ask for your help because it makes them feel like a bother. Would you ask for help from someone who complains about the help while performing it? It's never been something I consciously thought I was doing to get an upper hand, but as I sit back and analyze it, it is something which is logical, something which can benefit you and the power dynamic inherent to all connection, and so I feel that I started to do it naturally, knowing how my mind works. It's also likely something I learned from being raised by a raging narcissist who truly cares only for their own image and how they feel above all other concerns. But reason for it aside, it is still one of my biggest flaws and something I have to personally change in order to fulfill my end of a valuable relationship. Because this aspect leads to essentially you stating that your time is more valuable than theirs, that this 5 minutes of putting some clothes away or drying dishes is worth planting doubt and guilt in their head for needing a moment of help. It ignores context, such as how healthy either one is, how tough their recent days or weeks may have been, who has done what recently in terms of chores and combined efforts towards the situation, and it has many other faults which I have to slowly list and acknowledge to know how I can impact others. I could sit here all day and list off the detriments of that displeasure I make known. There could be probably a whole page when considering how those words become incorporated into someone else's mind, how for me they are a single moment that I regret anyway, and how for them it weaves into the fabric of their thoughts and desires, impacting how they interact with me for all time to come. In simple words, those few sentences create much more than their weight in drawbacks. And most of that list is something which could be avoided if I simply learned that sometimes there is a huge importance to what isn't said. And so that's what I sought to put logic to and pass on here today, and I hope that for those who need it, it has provided something positive as well. Don't take it as a message to see yourself as the villain, as there are times when one is justified in making displeasure known and complaining. After all, you feel negatively for a reason, and part of reaching a better world is often acting on those feelings against oppressive forces. But take this as that ever-needed gentle nudge to consider. What truly are your actions, their necessity, and their impact on others? After all, understanding it can be as simple as asking, how do you feel when I say that? And that's kind of where the two meet, using the importance of what is said to understand the importance of what isn't.